Good morning, Devils fans. We're talking the Swedish sniper, as today's spotlight is on Alexander Holtz. Born January 23rd, 2002 in Stockholm, Sweden, to his mother Camilla and his father Magnus, who had played hockey in Sweden in their second highest league. Growing up, Holtz played football, tennis, golf, basketball, but eventually settled on hockey as his sport of choice. Playing in what is essentially their midget equivalent with the Boot IF, he would make his junior debut at 13 when he played for the Nacka Farsta FOC U16 Division 1 team. He'd play 2 more years there where he'd play so well he would get promoted to the J18 Elite team, the highest level of U18 hockey in Sweden. He would average over 2 points per game there, even being 2 years younger than basically all of his competition. He'd be named to the Stockholm South team for the 2017 TV Pucken, a national junior hockey tournament. He would score 6 goals, 10 points in 6 games, and be awarded the Sven Tumba Award for Best Forward of the tournament. For the following season, Holtz would move to Djurgården IF to play with their junior team. The season after, he would make his pro debut, playing in the SHL on January 29, 2019, but would split time between there and juniors. The 2019-2020 season would see him score his first professional point and eventual first goal as part of the SHL. Due to that play, being in a professional league in Sweden at such a young age, and obviously always playing in a higher competition compared to his age level, he was quite high in the draft evaluations going into the 2020 NHL entry draft, where Holtz would be taken 7th overall by the New Jersey Devils. In total, he would play 4 seasons with Djurgården, the latter of which playing entirely with the professional club. Following that season, Holtz would sign his ELC with the Devils on April 19, 2021. For the 21-22 season, Holtz would start off with the Utica Devils, ultimately playing in 9 NHL games where he would record 2 assists. The first of which, being his first NHL point, would come November 9th, where he would assist on a Pavel Zacha goal in a win over the Florida Panthers. He'd play most of his time in the AHL that season, where he'd be among the top rookie scorers, marking 26 goals and 51 points in 52 games. For the 22-23 season, Holtz would make the opening night roster and would score his first NHL goal in that very game on the power play against Carter Hart in an eventual loss to the Philadelphia Flyers. However, over the season, Holtz would find himself a healthy scratch for a majority of the games, and when he was eventually sent down to Utica, he would have to fight off a bout of mono for a stretch of time, missing even more games. In total, he'd play 19 NHL games, the latter of which he'd score in 3 goals and 1 assist. And after fighting off that mono, he would finish out the AHL season with 11 points in 19 games and 5 points in 6 playoff games. So what do we get from Holtz on the ice? Well, we know he has his shot. From that amazing one-timer to his wrist shot, Holtz truly has an elite shot and essentially is the reason why he was drafted where he was. Now, that's not to understate his playmaking, which I also think is quite phenomenal, given how good of a shot he also has. He's able to provide very slick passes from tape to tape. Now, defensively, he's absolutely no shutdown guy. He's an offensive winger, obviously, and he plays as such. Likely in previous leagues, I think he maybe was able to get away with his defensive game, given what he brought on the offensive side, and that might be where he is getting some level of adjustment for the NHL level. Now, I know fans like to think his skating is what's been holding him back, and that is the general consensus, but I really think his skating's quite fine. Now, he's not the fastest, smoothest skater out there, but it's definitely more than good enough to play at the NHL level. Instead, I think his struggles seem to come from the pace of the game, his positioning off of the puck, and defensive reads in the D zone. Now, these are things that will come with more playing time, but unfortunately for Holtz last season, the team didn't really have the luxury to let him learn, and we're very much in win-now mode after the start of the year. I personally think after the Fire Lindy chance, he was very much so on the hot seat. He did not have the luxury to let Holtz just learn like we did with some of our younger guys in years prior. And once we started going on that winning streak, there was basically no chance Holtz was making it back in the lineup. So while he has excelled in every league he's played in, and especially the AHL, he needs to learn that pace of the game playing in the actual NHL. AHL is a bit of a slower league. Over in Europe, it had the bigger ice. He really just needs to learn it on the NHL ice. And I have no doubts he'll do that, given he's done it in every other league he's done it in prior. Off the ice, and that was most interesting to me at least, that as far as I'm aware, he is still dating Swedish sensation Clara Hammarström. She's essentially a Kardashian over in Sweden, formerly a competitive horse rider who transitioned over to a music artist. She's appeared in numerous televised singing competitions, basically similar to our version of The Voice. Now, the Kardashian comparison comes more so from the fact that her family has a TV series, like the Kardashians, named Familien Hammerstrom. Not necessarily comparing her to the Kardashian personality. As far as I'm aware, they're not very similar at all. Now, they've been dating for quite a while, but while there's no English sources on any of this stuff, I assume they're still together because as of 6 months ago, the Devils did do a piece on Holtz, and at that time, they were still dating. So, going forward, what can we expect from Holtz? Well, we currently have him penciled into the opening night roster, and it seems management does as well, as they haven't made any additional signings that would really block his path from making the team. We could absolutely see him in a top 6 role, but as of right now, I think myself and most others see him as that third line right winger, which would be a good spot for him, although not the most ideal in my opinion. Previously, he was never really given a shot with our top flight guys in season, but hey, even if he doesn't make it for the top 6, Plot and Hala aren't such a bad consolation prize. Assuming he is with the big club, I think he'll get that power play 2 time. And if the top unit struggles, kind of like I've talked about with other guys, and he is thriving on that second power play, he could definitely get time there as the trigger man. But between Timo and Toffoli, it's going to be pretty hard guys to knock out of the top unit. I highly doubt he'll see any penalty killing time. And that's not, a slight against him or anything. It's just not his game. And while, like I said, I don't think it's an ideal situation for him to be on the third line, just given the 2 other guys that are there. He's very likely to see a lot of D-zone starts and those defensive type of matchups. But if he can prove himself on that line, might be able to give the confidence in the coaching staff that he can play that 200-foot game, even if, again, he's not really doing the defensive workload on the line. But can at least get up and down the ice and play at that pace and do the proper in-zone defensive plays, that they will trust him enough to put him in the top 6 against higher competition. The good thing for the club is he is waiver exempt. So in the worst case scenario, if we do have to send him down to Utica, it's not really an issue. It's not a do or die season, even if the fans feel like it might be for Holtz. Now, I think Holtz is bound to make that impact, but again, I do have some concerns with the deployment on the third line. I don't think it's the most ideal for him. Kind of crazy how he went from stapled on Jack's line in the preseason to never seeing that line again. But given how stacked the top 6 is now, Holtz is going to have to outplay most likely Mercer, maybe Toffoli, but I really think Toffoli is definitely going to be in that top 6. And Mercer could, while he has a bit more of a third line type game that he can play, given how Mercer played in the top 6 last season, it's going to be hard to out him as well. So Holtz really would have to play his best game of his life to see time in that top 6. And I think he's capable of doing it. So it's a good problem to have, such a stacked top 9, really, that even if he isn't in the top 6, Hall and Palat are second-line guys on a lot of other teams in the league. So it's not that I think the skill level of the guys he's playing with is going to be subpar to really set him up to thrive. It's more so just going to be that deployment asset of it. But, again, it's a good problem to have. I think Holtz is going to do great this year no matter what. Third line or top 6. It's his situation to make the most of. So top 3. For Holtz, at number 3, I'm going to come in with dating one of the most famous people from your country. It's a bit of a flex, and also it's great exposure for the Devils is really why I put it here. He makes the big club. He's here long term. Claire's coming out, watching a lot of games, dressing up in Devils garb, wearing it on one of their most watched TV shows in their country. Great exposure for the team. Get some young kids rooting for the team would be great. Number 2 is going to be the multi-point game that he had versus Detroit. He had a sick assist to Mikey McLeod, but it actually started off as a 2-on-1 with him and Wood. He had a great pass setting up Wood, which should have been almost a sure goal. Wood, of course, stuffed it into the goalie's pads, but Holtz did not give up on the play, instead followed the rebound, turned around, and set up Mikey for an open net goal. It's kind of what I was talking about earlier. Holtz in the offensive zone is quite the stud. He does great in board battles, though it's not like his premier ability, but instead can follow the flow of play there, does not give up, and can set up amazing passes for open net goals. He also had a goal in that game where he just crossed over the blue line, shuffled past one Detroit defender, and then beat the goalie clean with no screen, really showing off just that elite shot that we have talked about. speaking of that elite shot, coming in at number 1 was that opening night goal against Carter Hart and the Philadelphia Flyers, which did make it all the more sweet, even if it ended up being a loss. But I just remember watching that goal and being like, hey, this is Holtz coming out party. Finally, it's all coming together, and the hype around that. Obviously, we all know it didn't quite work out that way, but I think we'll see that and more for this upcoming season. Well, that's really going to do it for this episode. I hope it did come across quite well, as I had already recorded this once, and it didn't quite record, so this is my second time through on it. But as always, I'm going to see you guys again tomorrow morning. We're going to make it through this hump day on the work week. I'm actually off work tomorrow and Friday, so looking forward to that. And yeah, let's make it through today. I'll see everyone tomorrow. And as always, and forever, let's go Devils.